Grace and peace to you in the name of God the Creator, Christ the Redeemer, and the Spirit who sustains us. Amen. Have you ever wondered where dirt comes from? I was reading the article, Reading the Bible Through a Green Lens by Calvin DeWitt this week as part of my sermon prep. And I came across the concept of ecosystem services, which I was not familiar with. According to the USDA, ecosystem services are the things that the ecosystem does that directly or indirectly benefit humans. So there are four basic categories of ecosystem services. Provisioning services, which include material or energy outputs such as food, fiber for clothing, and fresh water. Regulating services, such as air and soil quality and natural flood containment. Supporting services, such as wildlife habitats and biodiversity. And cultural services, such as opportunities for recreation and tourism. But as I was reading this article, my interest was piqued when he mentioned the development of soil through the weathering of rocks, and I found myself wondering, where does dirt come from? Unless you have a professional interest in dirt, unless you're a soil scientist or a horticulturist or a farmer, my guess is that you probably take dirt for granted. I know that I do. It's just there. It's what the grass grows in, and when it rains, it turns into mud, and when it's dry and hot, it can crack and be hard to the touch. So I looked it up. I found a website called Exploring Nature, where I learned that new soil is being made all the time. It takes about 15 years to make half an inch of soil in a wet climate, longer in a dry climate. And there are several layers. The top layer is called the surface litter layer, and that's where you find dead leaves, mushrooms, and other organic material. The next layer down is the topsoil, which is made up of the decomposing litter layer and minerals from rocks that are being broken down over time. The next layer is subsoil and is mostly rock and sand and clay, and the bottom layer, the parent material, is the bedrock. The nutrients are in the topsoil. There are good bacteria and earthworms and other sorts of living things that contribute to the decomposition of the organic material from the litter layer. And all of the minerals and vitamins from the subsoil and the parent layer and from the decomposing organic material from the litter layer dissolve in the water that's being held in the topsoil layer and are absorbed up through roots to feed our shade and fruit trees, our vegetable plants and grains and flowers. Creation is constantly happening. Every second of every minute of every hour of every day, soil is being created. Earthworms and insects and microorganisms are working away, doing the work that they were created to do to help feed everything that lives on land, from the smallest plant to the largest elephant. And to me, that is miraculous. And it's on purpose. That's how God created the world and how God continues to recreate the world minute by minute, day by day, millennium by millennium. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been some challenges along the way. The people of Israel understood themselves as being closely tied to the land God gave them, a land in which they faced their own ecological challenges, from floods to droughts, from near desert conditions to winds that threatened their topsoil. And then they were conquered by the Babylonians and taken into exile. Eventually, Cyrus came to the throne of Persia and led Persia on a campaign to conquer Babylon. The prophet in our Isaiah text sees God working through Cyrus in secret, granting him military prowess to defeat the empire that had taken God's people into exile, knowing that Cyrus would release them back to their homeland. The people have been living in chaos for decades, And so the prophet reminds them that God did not create the earth to be in chaos. Instead, God created the earth to be a place of fruitfulness and joy. God is not arbitrary, the prophet reminds the people. Instead, they are a loving God with a plan for creation. And that plan for creation is echoed by the writer of Revelation with the promise of a new heaven and a new earth. Revelation is a work of apocalyptic literature. It's been used as inspiration for some Christian apocalyptic literature series, and even secular pop culture tends to draw on its imagery. Some people say that Stephen King's The Stand is a retelling of Revelation. And of course, The West Wing relates to everything. Lord John Marbury quotes Revelation in an episode about trying to avoid nuclear war. But pop culture notwithstanding, Revelation isn't really about the end of the world and the coming of heaven. It's about the completion of God's work of recreation right here on earth, when we finally reach a place where we have conquered all the things that turn us away from God and where God has made all things new. In the new heavens and the new earth, pollution and erosion will be a thing of the past. There won't be a dead zone caused by pesticides at the mouth of the Mississippi River. Our water will be clean, and there will no longer be an island of plastic in the Pacific. Plants and animals will thrive, and people will practice good stewardship of natural resources. And we will care for each other, ensuring that everyone has enough to eat and shelter from the weather. That's how the writer of Revelation interprets God's promise to us. But how do we know this to be true? What reason do we have to believe that this will come to pass? We have the words of Jesus, who tells us that God loved the world so much that they gave Jesus to the world so that if we believe, we can be set free from the power of death. But this verse isn't just about personal salvation. It's about so much more. This message is not just for the people who pay attention and do the right thing every time. It's also for the people who stumble from time to time, and people who don't have it figured out yet but are on the right path, and people who may never have it figured out. And it goes beyond people. It's a message of healing and redemption for all of creation. And we are a part of that. God's judgment and salvation is not a future event. It is underway right now. We are called to be the disciples of the one who makes everything right again, the one who reconciles all things, the one who heals the world and everyone in it, the one who is always making creation new again, the one who set in motion the act by which half an inch of topsoil is created every 15 years. And while I'm sure there are scientific reasons why it takes 15 years to create half an inch of topsoil, I believe there are also theological reasons for it. Does knowing that it takes 15 years to create half an inch of topsoil help you to see creation and our role in it differently? Urban culture treats the earth as an abstraction. I'm not a gardener, so I can go for years without any meaningful interaction with soil other than walking across it. But knowing the time and the effort on the part of the worms, the insects, and the microorganisms, on the part of the earth itself, into sustaining this topsoil that is so essential to life, I'm beginning to understand that we have to relearn what it means to love the earth as our home and to be its stewards. And so if we truly want to follow Jesus, we are called to practice the economy of stewardship. We are called to remember that everything is God's. The surface litter layer of leaves and mushrooms and fallen trees and other organic material, the topsoil, the subsoil, and the parent layer, as well as all of the plants that push up through the litter layer to reach the air, to process and pass on the nutrients that are so essential for us and for all living creatures. We are called to remember that the earthworms and microorganisms are God's. We are called to remember that everything in the life cycle, earth, rain, plants, animals, humans, bacteria, is God's. Even the molecules that make up our bodies are God's. And one day we will hand them back to God to be reformed and reconstituted into other living things. And so when we look at the world from that perspective, from the perspective of needing to care for the earth because we all belong to God, and we share particles in our bodies with things that have gone before, what responsibility do we have to care for our home that we call earth? And how does that broaden our understanding of who are our neighbors? Yes, we understand that our neighbors live next door to us and across the street from us and on the other side of the globe, but our neighbors also live forward in time. When we think about caring for our neighbors, do we think about what sort of home we are leaving for our neighbors who have not yet been born? God continues to make all things new, and they ask us to help in that work. Amen.